The saddest song I have ever heard wasn't played on the radio. It was recorded for me. I just waited 52 years to listen to it. At 84 years old, my hearing isn't what it used to be, but regret has perfect hearing. It remembers every sentence you wish you had answered differently, every goodbye you called necessary, every dream you folded away because someone convinced you that practical decisions always lead to happy endings. If you stay with me, I'll tell you how one dusty cassette tape made me question an entire lifetime. I spent more than 5 decades believing I had chosen security over uncertainty. What I really chose was comfort over joy. Those two things are not the same. I was 22 when I met Daniel Harper in the spring of 1964. He wasn't wealthy, he wasn't polished, he worked in his father's small garage, came home with grease beneath his fingernails, and always smelled faintly of engine oil mixed with peppermint gum. He also laughed with his whole heart. Back then, that seemed like enough. Every Friday evening, he'd drive me to Miller's Lake in an old green pickup that rattled louder than it accelerated. We'd sit on the tailgate watching the sunset, sharing a bottle of orange soda because neither of us could afford dinner at the nice restaurant across town. "I'll build you a better life one day," he always said. I believed him. My parents didn't. My father owned a successful furniture business. He had spent his entire life climbing out of poverty, and he refused to watch me climb back into it. "You need stability," he told me one evening over dinner. "You need someone who can provide. A good husband isn't measured by his paycheck." I answered, "No." My father replied quietly, "But unpaid bills make poor love stories." A month later I met Richard. He wore tailored suits, owned a new BIC, worked at the bank. My parents smiled more during one dinner with Richard than they had during 2 years of Daniel's visits. I wish I could tell you I fought for love. I didn't. Fear often disguises itself as responsibility. At 24, I convinced myself I was being mature. I told Daniel we needed different futures. He looked at me for a long time before speaking. "If money ever makes you happier than I did," he whispered, "I'll understand." Then he handed me a small wrapped package. "Open it someday." I never did. I married Richard 3 months later. From the outside, my life looked beautiful. A brick house, reliable income, country club dinners, family vacations every summer. People admired us. They should have looked closer. Richard was dependable, responsible, faithful. He was also emotionally distant, as though affection was something to budget carefully instead of giving freely. We never argued loudly. We simply stopped talking deeply. By our 20th anniversary, we knew each other's schedules better than each other's hearts. He died peacefully after 4 to 6 years of marriage. I mourned him honestly. He deserved that. He had been a good man, but being a good man is not always the same as being your great love. For 2 years after his funeral, I sorted through closets, drawers, and old boxes, trying to make sense of 8 decades collected inside one house. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, I found a dusty shoebox hidden behind winter blankets. Inside were photographs, movie tickets, a pressed wildflower, and Daniel's unopened package. The paper had yellowed with age. My hands trembled as I untied the faded string. Inside was a cassette tape, a folded note, one sentence: "When you miss my voice, press play." I stared at those words for several minutes. I almost laughed. Who still owned a cassette player? My grandson did. He collected old electronics for fun. The next morning he brought one over, cleaned the dust from the speakers, inserted the tape, and quietly left the room. The machine clicked. Static filled the silence. Then, his voice. "Hi, Emily." I covered my mouth. It sounded exactly as I remembered. Young, warm, certain. "If you are hearing this, then life took us in different directions." He chuckled softly. "I figured talking would be easier than writing because maybe one day you'll forget my handwriting, but I hope you never forget my voice." I closed my eyes. For the next 20 minutes, Daniel spoke about our evenings by the lake, about the orange sodas, about my terrible singing, about the future he had imagined. Near the end, his voice became quieter. "I hope he makes you laugh." A pause. "If he doesn't, promise me you'll keep laughing anyway." Another pause. "And if life ever feels lonely, don't blame yourself for choosing what you believed was right." Then, almost whispering, "I loved you enough to let you go before you ever asked." The tape clicked. Silence. I sat there for nearly an hour, not crying, not moving, just listening to a room that suddenly felt 50 years larger. The greatest tragedy wasn't that I hadn't married Daniel. It was realizing I had spent decades believing practical decisions guaranteed emotional safety. They don't. Security can protect your house. It cannot warm your heart. The following weekend I drove to Miller's Lake. The restaurant was gone. The old dock had been rebuilt. Children were fishing, where we once watched sunsets. I bought an orange soda from a nearby store, sat alone, and smiled. Not because my life had been perfect, not because I wished to erase it. Richard had given me kindness, my children, my grandchildren, a good home. I would never dishonor those gifts, but I finally allowed myself to grieve the life I never lived. Those are two different kinds of gratitude. People ask what my biggest regret is. It isn't marrying Richard, it is believing that love and responsibility could never exist together. No one can promise you which decision will lead to happiness, but be careful when fear introduces itself as wisdom. Sometimes fear wears a respectable suit, sometimes it carries a steady paycheck, sometimes everyone applauds your decision, and sometimes, 52 years later, you discover that the most beautiful love song of your life has been waiting patiently inside a dusty box. I still keep that cassette beside my bed, not because I live in the past, because one voice reminds me of something I hope you never forget. The safest choice is not always the one that lets your heart come home.